The story of Jon Snow, Daenerys Targaryen, and Viserys Targaryen is one of tragedy, ambition, and destiny. But what if Jon Snow, rather than growing up as the bastard son of Ned Stark, had been raised alongside his cousins, Daenerys and Viserys? What if, instead of being raised in the cold, isolated north, Jon had grown up in the Targaryen household, with both his cousins? Would he have become the same man? Or would his childhood and upbringing have shaped him into a different leader, one capable of uniting Westeros in a way that the realm had never seen before? To understand the potential consequences of Jon growing up with Daenerys and Viserys, we must first consider the political landscape of the time. When Robert Baratheon's rebellion led to the fall of House Targaryen, the royal family was scattered, with Viserys and Daenerys escaping to exile in Essos. Jon Snow, on the other hand, was born to Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen. Raised as the son of Ned Stark, far from the intrigue and political games of the court, his upbringing in Winterfell shaped him into a strong, honorable figure who was deeply loyal to his family and friends. But what if Jon had been raised in King's Landing, surrounded by the complex political maneuverings of the Targaryen family? What if he had grown up alongside Daenerys, Viserys, and their family, learning the intricacies of the throne and the weight of being a Targaryen heir? Jon's relationship with his cousins would have been key to understanding how this version of Jon Snow might have acted. Jon, as the son of Rhaegar Targaryen, would still have been a direct descendant of Aerys II, the Mad King. His presence at the Red Keep would have been significant, given that his claim to the throne, though disputed by many, would have still carried weight in the eyes of those who believed in the Targaryen bloodline. Raised alongside Daenerys, Jon would have known from a young age the legacy of the Targaryen family, the struggles of exile, and the deep desire for revenge against Robert Baratheon, who led the rebellion that ended the reign of his grandfather. This shared experience could have created a strong bond between Jon and Daenerys, forming a foundation of unity that might have solidified their leadership when the time came to reclaim the throne. Viserys, on the other hand, would have played a far different role in Jon's upbringing. Viserys's ambition and his obsession with restoring House Targaryen to the throne were evident from his youth. In this alternate reality, Viserys would likely have seen Jon as both a potential ally and a rival. Viserys's relationship with Jon could have been one of jealousy and competition, especially if Jon demonstrated the same strength and leadership abilities as his father, Rhaegar. Growing up in the royal family, Jon might have been trained in the art of ruling, military strategy, and diplomacy, which would have helped him mature into a leader. However, Viserys's obsession with power and his belief that he was the rightful king might have led to tension between the two. As a result, Jon might have found himself torn between his loyalty to his family and the desire to fulfill his destiny as the true heir to the Targaryen throne. While Daenerys and Jon would have likely formed a strong bond, their paths could have diverged as they matured. Daenerys, who had always struggled with her own sense of worth and identity, would have seen Jon not just as a cousin, but as an equal, someone who shared the same royal bloodline and could potentially help her realize her vision of returning to Westeros. Jon's strong sense of honor and his determination to do what was right could have made him the perfect partner for Daenerys, especially as she struggled with the harsh realities of ruling and reclaiming her family's throne. Together, they could have become a powerful force in the realm, with Jon's wisdom and Daenerys's fire driving their cause. But what about Viserys? His bitter obsession with the throne and his resentment towards Robert Baratheon would likely have led to his downfall. Raised with a sense of entitlement, Viserys would not have taken kindly to Jon's growing influence, especially if Jon proved himself to be a more capable and compassionate leader than Viserys had ever been. The tension between Jon and Viserys could have eventually led to a confrontation, with Jon standing in the way of Viserys's ambition. This rivalry could have fractured the Targaryen family, causing Jon to question his place in a world filled with political intrigue and familial betrayal. In this version of Jon's life, his relationship with Daenerys would have been key to shaping the future of Westeros. Raised together in the Red Keep, Jon and Daenerys would have shared not just a bloodline, but also a vision for the future. A future that might have been very different from the one that played out in Game of Thrones. Rather than being divided by the events of the past, they could have united their forces to reclaim the Iron Throne, with Jon acting as the stabilizing force and Daenerys as the fiery, determined queen. Their shared goal of defeating the Lannisters, reclaiming the realm, and restoring the Targaryen name could have been the foundation of a strong and united monarchy. However, their shared destiny would not have been without challenges. In a world where loyalty is constantly tested, Jon and Daenerys would have faced internal and external struggles that could have torn them apart. The political intricacies of Westeros would have tested their relationship, with Jon's honor and Daenerys' desire for vengeance often pulling them in opposite directions. Their relationship with Viserys, whose ambitions would have been increasingly dangerous, could have made them question whether their goals aligned or whether they would be forced into a dangerous competition for the throne. As Jon Snow matured alongside Daenerys and Viserys Targaryen, the political and personal dynamics between them would have deeply influenced their decisions and actions later in life. Raised in the heart of Targaryen power, Jon would have been uniquely positioned to lead, but the intricate relationships with his cousins could have set the course for not just their lives, but for the entire realm. The challenges Jon would have faced growing up among the Targaryens would have made him a very different leader than the one we saw in the original story. The political landscape of a united Targaryen family. The first significant change we must consider is the political impact Jon's upbringing in King's Landing would have had on his leadership skills. In the world of Westeros, political alliances and betrayals were the lifeblood of power. While Jon Stark's life as Ned Stark's son gave him a strong moral compass, growing up in the Targaryen court would have exposed him to the complexities of diplomacy, military strategy, and backroom political gamesmanship. Jon would have seen firsthand how Viserys, desperate to reclaim the throne, used any means necessary to push his claim. He would have watched as Daenerys grew into the ruler she was destined to become, with a fierce, sometimes reckless, drive to reclaim her family's legacy. Jon's proximity to Daenerys and Viserys would have given him a unique perspective on the differences between them. Viserys, driven by his obsessive thirst for power, might have seen Jon as a threat to his claim to the throne. His jealousy could have led to power struggles between the two, especially if Jon, who would have likely been recognized as a potential rival due to his direct connection to Rhaegar, grew more popular among the people of Westeros. Viserys' tyrannical nature, combined with Jon's honor and respect for his family, would have sparked tension, possibly leading to Jon's rebellion against his cousin in an effort to secure his own future and that of Westeros. Daenerys, on the other hand, would have shared a deep bond with Jon, forged through their shared Targaryen bloodline and their mutual sense of duty to reclaim the Iron Throne. As they grew older, Daenerys would have come to see Jon not just as a cousin, but as a potential partner in her quest to restore House Targaryen to its rightful place. They would have worked together to consolidate their power, with Daenerys' fiery ambition and Jon's more measured, strategic approach, creating a balance of leadership that could have been both powerful and effective. However, the political challenge would have been immense. Daenerys' fire and Jon's caution might have led to differing approaches, especially when dealing with the volatile politics of Westeros. The impact of Jon's leadership on the War of the Five Kings. If Jon had grown up in the Red Keep, his place in the War of the Five Kings would have been much different. Instead of being an isolated figure in the north, Jon would have been at the center of the political storm in King's Landing, surrounded by powerful figures who could either support or undermine him. The most likely scenario is that Jon would have risen to become a natural leader, combining the martial skills of a Stark with the Targaryen legacy of rule. Daenerys, Jon, and Viserys would have eventually found themselves at the forefront of a struggle for the throne, but with Jon's leadership, the war might have had a very different outcome. Instead of Robb Stark's rebellion, Jon could have rallied the North and the South under the banner of a united Targaryen family. The Lannisters, who were already facing pressure from the Tyrells and the Baratheons, would have been forced to confront a stronger Targaryen faction. Jon's position would have been key in solidifying the South's allegiance to the Targaryens. His birthright as Rhaegar Targaryen's son would have been an essential piece of his claim, and growing up with Daenerys, he would have had a more practical understanding of how to navigate the shifting alliances of Westeros. His relationship with the Lords of the South would have been important in forming the alliances needed to challenge the Lannisters, and his more tempered approach could have won the support of lords who were disillusioned with the Lannisters' control over the Iron Throne. Viserys' role in the Targaryen family dynamic. While Jon and Daenerys would have formed a strong alliance, Viserys' role in their family dynamic would have been more complicated. In this alternate history, Viserys might have seen Jon as a rival for the throne, especially if Jon proved to be a stronger and more capable leader. Viserys' pride and sense of entitlement would have likely put him at odds with Jon, particularly if he saw Jon as someone who could steal his birthright. This rivalry could have led to increasing tensions, possibly resulting in a power struggle between the cousins. However, Jon's sense of duty and his respect for his family might have made him reluctant to fully confront Viserys, which would have created a delicate balance between them. Daenerys' own sense of justice and her quest for revenge against Robert Baratheon's rebellion might have pushed her to take a more proactive stance in securing the throne, possibly even urging Jon to act decisively against Viserys' dangerous ambitions. Together, Jon and Daenerys could have confronted Viserys in a way that protected the Targaryen family from his own delusions of grandeur. The Targaryen family's reclamation of the throne, the final consequence of Jon's upbringing with Daenerys and Viserys, would be the reclamation of the Iron Throne. With Jon and Daenerys leading the charge, their combined forces could have taken King's Landing in a much more coordinated effort. Their shared goal of restoring the Targaryen dynasty would have driven them to work together strategically, with Jon as a stabilizing force and Daenerys as the powerful, driven leader. The Lannisters, weakened by internal strife and external pressure, would have been unseated from the throne far sooner. However, the true test would have been whether Jon and Daenerys could have remained united in the long term. The power struggles within the Targaryen family, combined with the political machinations of the Lords of Westeros, could have tested their bond. Would Jon, with his honor, have been willing to support Daenerys' more ruthless actions, or would he have stood in the way of her ambitions? The complexities of ruling together would have forced both to compromise on their ideals, ultimately deciding whether the Targaryens could restore order to Westeros, or if their rivalry would undo everything they had worked for. In conclusion, Jon Snow's upbringing with Daenerys and Viserys would have created a dynamic unlike any other in Westeros. As a united Targaryen family, they could have overcome the political and military challenges of the realm, restoring the Iron Throne to the rightful heirs. Jon's leadership, tempered by his honor and his experience in the North, would have balanced Daenerys' fiery determination, potentially creating the perfect partnership to rule Westeros. But the challenges they faced as cousins, rivals, and heirs would have been immense, and whether they could have maintained unity to reclaim the throne would be the ultimate question of their shared destiny.